So just because you've been thinking about this doesn't mean that the story is true. And often with stories, I mean, I used to tell my mother stories, and then she said, no, well, that's not what actually happened. But it's certainly your own story and how you remember. And that these myths, these are stories that come from our families, our cultures, etc. And so these are just like myths about emotions. And that is that there is a right way to feel in every situation. So in this situation, everybody should feel that way. And that's just not the case. Not only is it not there's not a single way to feel in every situation, but you yourself might feel differently in the same situation. You know, I certainly feel much grumpier late in the day than I do when I wake up. So if people ask me for complicated things at the end of the day, I tend to do less well. I'm more irritable than earlier on. Now, this is another thing, is that, you know, it's, and different cultures have different ways of doing this, and that is, how do you speak about your emotional life? How do men share their emotional experiences? And that sometimes they're saying, you know, well, I don't have a therapist, and I don't get a therapist, and we don't talk about feelings, and in my culture, we don't talk about feelings, that these are signs of weakness, that we should be able to just get over them. That uncomfortable feelings are bad, that being emotional means being out of control, that people that just should be positive, just be positive. That all painful emotions are a result of bad attitude. It's that, you know, that if you would just be positive. But the thing is that if you knew how to do that, then that's what you would be doing. So when you tell someone to do something, you also have to necessarily explain how to do it. Because if you've never ridden a bicycle before, just say, well, just go and ride the bicycle. I mean, it's easy for someone who knows how to ride the bicycle, but not if someone hasn't. And then you have to say, okay, this is how you do it. So when you tell someone to be positive and they don't know how to, you know, you have to be able to break it down. So the other thing is, if others don't approve of how I'm feeling, I shouldn't feel the way that I do. So if I feel sad, but others don't think I should be sad, then I shouldn't be feeling that way. I have to find a new way to feel. Painful emotions are not really important and should be ignored. So lots of stories that people talk about emotions, and think about often what we're trying to do out of kindness is tell kids to get over it, that they shouldn't feel that way. I'm scared of the monster under the bed. Don't feel that way. There is no monster under the bed. You shouldn't feel that way. You should grow out of it. And for many kids, that's actually okay. But for very sensitive kids, they then begin to hide those feelings. But that's just how their brain is working. So think about the myths and the stories that you tell your own children about emotions. So, as I say, that the more emotional you become, the further you get from the cortex. And when you have very intense emotions, it makes it difficult to think clearly. Now, schools are a place where what we want is people to think clearly, so that they can learn mathematics and geography and all the stuff that they do in school. But if you are feeling very intensely emotional, you are getting away from the part of the brain that does the thinking. And I mean, think about it for yourself. If you're really angry and somebody comes up to you and says, you know, what do you think about the political situation in China? You know, it's like, you're just angry. You can't think about it. It's not the time to have a discussion. It makes it difficult to behave effectively. Like, And we see this a lot in road rage. I don't know if you have much road rage. I mean, the way that people drive around here, I have to say. I live in Boston, so I don't know if when I was driving around yesterday, I thought I was back in Boston, because it's, people driving all over the place. But, that you get really angry, and then people don't behave that effectively when you have very intense emotions. And the thing about it is that when you're very angry or you're very sad, that behaving effectively is really the last thing that you want to do. I want you to calm down. I want you to be more effective. I want you to be more controlled. It's like, go to hell, Like you just, it's not something that you want to do. And actually, I mean, if you've had, I think about someone that you love very strongly, a wife, a husband, and you've really are upset because of something that they did, and they tell you to calm down. It's like, it gets you much more angry. It's like, don't tell me what to do. But this is what we do. We tell people to calm down. It makes it difficult to stay present. That you are just, in any given moment, you're just here. This is where you are. Right now, you're just here. But when you get really angry, your mind goes to some very dark places. And if you were to be honest with yourself about the places that your mind goes to and say them out loud, it might not look like a very nice thing. But your mind can go to some revenge, getting rid of the person, not wanting to talk, some pretty awful places, destructive places. So when you have very intense emotions. So why learn to control them? Okay. To still the body, to calm things down, slow your heart rate, slow your breathing, to quiet behavior, that if you can control your emotion, the thing that causes the urge, that if you can control that emotional experience, then you can control what happens afterwards. To access your inner wisdom, that when you're very emotional, a lot of your gut reaction, your intense, your intuition goes out the thinking. A lot of the values, you say some terrible things when you have strong emotions that are against your values, that you would never say if you didn't have those intense emotions. To be more effective in dealing with short-term and long-term goals. To improve your self-respect. So these are like, again, and if for people who have good self-respect and everything, you don't sort of say, why do I have good self-esteem? Why do I have, good self-respect? You've got to respect yourself. Well, how do I do that? And it starts very early on. We teach the children how to do that. But, a lot of people during the break were asking about, that their children are now much older, 16, 17, 18. You can always learn something. You can always learn. It might be more difficult. It's more difficult to learn a language when you're older than when you're younger, but you can still learn the language. It's more difficult to learn the language of emotions when you're older than when you're younger, but you can still learn the language of emotions. Okay, so we've talked a lot about emotions and all that. So now let's talk about how. What are the techniques that you can actually employ day to day? So the first thing that you need to understand your emotion, because, I mean, this might go without saying. If I say, okay, you're really angry and you want to yell at me, and I take out a box of tissues and I say, here's a box of tissues. If you want to cry, you can cry. Well, I'm addressing the wrong emotion. So without naming and labeling, without knowing what it is that you're solving, you're not necessarily solving the right problem. So you have to know what it is that you want to do before you answer. You know, if you get a test and they say, well, answer all the questions, but there's no questions on the test, well, what question do you answer? What is the question? So what is it that you're trying to control? So you have to learn to name and label, observe and describe. Oh, there's that emotion showing up. What is it? It's based on, okay, I've gone through this. I remember I noticed my action urge. I noticed my feeling. I wanted to go to bed. I wanted to isolate. Oh yeah, I've gone through that. Observe and describe. Okay, that's sadness showing up for me, and understand the functions. And then you also have to reduce the vulnerability to emotion. So, for instance, at night when I haven't slept very well, I am more vulnerable to being angry and irritable. If you want something very important done, don't ask me at night. Ask me first thing in the morning. I'm just much better. My brain is more rested. So I know that that's a vulnerability factor. For some of the kids, being on drugs is a vulnerability factor. For some of the kids, being on other medications, not eating. You know, we were talking about this yesterday, that there's some people who get, the more they don't eat, the more angry they become. And so we call that being, so if you're hungry, you get angry, hangry, H-A-N-G-R-Y, so that you're getting more angry because you're just so hungry. So you have to know what your own vulnerability factor is and increase positive emotions. I mean, you know, we have to, for those of us, I mean, if you're happy or not, but we have to live antidepressant lives. We don't take antidepressants. Live antidepressant lives. What are the things that make you happy? I often say, she says, well, what makes you happy? You know, I like to read. Well, when was the last time you read something? Oh, a couple of months ago. But you know that makes you happy. Do that thing. Live an antidepressant life. Do the things that make you happy. Now, obviously, you can't do it all the time. You can't be reading all the time or going for walks or listening to music all the time. But put those things that you know. Oh, I have these friends that make me really happy. Well, spend time with those friends that make you really happy. It may not make somebody else happy, but live the life that gives you those positive experiences. You know what they are. Then we have to decrease emotional suffering, letting go of those painful and being mindful of painful emotions. And we'll get into this very powerful technique of acting opposite to painful emotions. And so I'm going to go over this quickly, but I'll get back to this slide because this is really important. Okay, so this doesn't work, you know. Could we up the dosage? I still have feelings. So they're trying to, you know, people come and say, you know, I have very strong emotions. I just don't want to feel anything. I say, you know what we're going to do? I've got the perfect solution. I'm going to take you to an intensive care unit bed. I'm going to hook an IV onto you. I'm going to turn up the drugs, and we'll put you to sleep for the rest of your life, anesthetize you. Then you won't have emotions. You're going to have emotions. There's no drug that's going to take away emotions. You don't want that to happen. If you imagine the body's so beautifully designed to have all these things, you know, you've got heat sensors, so you know, you touch something and it's hot. You know, I could give you a pill that takes that away, and you know, you'd burn your hand. Emotions tell you that there's something going on that you need to do something about. If you don't get rid of fear, you know, the snake comes in and bites you and you die. So you have to have those emotions. We can't take them away, but you can learn to diminish the intensity and of them and change how you experience them. Stay away from the medications. Okay, so how do we reduce vulnerability to negative emotions? So we've got this little acronym, ABC, please. And we'll get into each of these separately. So, okay, accumulate positives. So build positive experiences, increase pleasant events that lead to positive emotions, do one thing each day. So I want to actually ask our two teachers who have disruptive kids in the classroom. So, like, what's a nice thing that you could do for yourself every day? Go to the gym. There you go. Okay, and do you do it? Okay, excellent. So this is very good. Because sometimes we know the thing that makes us, but then we're so tired. Even though you know that that is the thing that's going to, you know what the most difficult part of going to the gym is? The first 15 minutes, getting in your car and going. Once you're there, it's okay. So this is what I'm saying. Do the things that make you happy. Especially, you say, well, okay, but your friend doesn't like to go to the gym, and that's not what makes her happy. Well, she doesn't have to go to the gym with you, and she can do what makes you happy. Yeah. Dark chocolate. There you go. I'm with you. So yeah, right. So you'll have your dark the chocolate. Whatever it is. But so know it for yourself. Do you like to cook? Do those things that make you happy. It's like you get home and you're so tired. So you just lie there and you're miserable. If being miserable makes you happy, then do that. And one of the things that you can do, and there's a lot of evidence about this, and that is, you don't have to wait till your child gets married or graduates from Harvard or anything like that to be happy. There are these tiny little moments every single day that you can be happy for. What are those little happies? So have a gratitude journal, something you can say, I'm grateful that my kid wasn't disruptive in class today, or that that the chicken actually tasted like chicken today at the cafeteria, or whatever it is. Just these little things that just make you happy. And if you're going to forget, because you're getting tired, write them down and say, you know what, that's a favorite movie show of mine. Okay, I'm going to do some of that. Build mastery. What do I want to be good at doing? Okay, what is something, maybe somebody can tell me, something that they want to do that they haven't gotten to do, that they think is going to make them happy. Anybody want to learn a new skill? Yes. What do you want to do? You want to learn a new language. Excellent. Something else. Salsa dancing. Oh my goodness. Okay. Salsa dancing. You got new language, salsa dancing. What else? Yeah. Get your PhD. Absolutely. Yeah. Anybody? Yeah. Piano playing. There you go. Now, you can imagine, they may or may not make you happy, all of these things, but these are things that you can imagine are something that you want to do. Again, these are very individual, idiosyncratic. But back in the days when I was slimmer and running marathons, I ran 57, I had a neighbor, and two neighbors. One of them said, I want to run a marathon one day with you. And the other one also said that. But up to this day, the one who just talks about it is still talking about it, and he never runs. And the other one went out and started running, and now has run some marathons. So the thing is that don't just talk about it. So, okay, what are the steps? Like, okay, you're going to get your PhD. What are you actually going to do? How are you going to break it down? How are you going to do the piano? How are you going to do the salsa? Where's the salsa classes? Have I spoken to an instructor? Am I practicing? Am I teaching others? Am I showing other people what I've learned? How am I doing it? So, who's a friend of yours? Do you have a friend here? You don't? Somebody who? Wait, when I come back. Where do you live? Are you from here? Are you live in Kuwait? Do we have any other Saudis here? Okay. Somehow you two are going to have to connect. When I come back, she's going to have learned salsa. Okay, what language are you going to learn? Dutch. You're going to keep her, your friend. Is she your friend? Somebody has to, the commitment, you're going to be working on your PhD, piano. You need a friend. Have some goals, and have some dedication, and have somebody check in with you just to make sure. Because otherwise, we'll come back here and I'm going to say, I won't remember. I say, okay, what do people want to do? And you'll say, I want to learn how to play the piano. I say, oh, didn't you say that last time? I say, how far did you get? Oh, I don't know. I kind of nowhere. I just thought about it. So it's like, this is what you're going to do. What are the things? Because you sort of think that that's what's going to make you happy. So you're going to build mastery in things that you want. And our lives aren't so absolutely complete that there's not something else that we can do new. And the excitement that you get when you have new things in your life. So it's like, you're like, okay, what are you going to do? cope ahead for emotional situations. So that once you know this situation is difficult for me, then you cope ahead. Like, okay, what are the things that I need to do in order to deal with this, rather than just walking in and then, being surprised that the person's yelling at me. And I say, well, I do this all the time, and why am I surprised? I say, wait a second, I need to have this discussion. So, imagine, I'm visiting an aunt who's always yelling at me, or a relative, and they're always critical. So, and it's going to be miserable. It really is. It's going to be terrible. I don't want to go. So you say, okay, well, wait a second. Okay, I have to go. What can I do differently? Okay, maybe I can go, but I don't have to stay there the whole time. Maybe I can make sure that my cousins are there. Maybe I'm just going to say, you know what, I'm just going to accept that this is all it's going to be. How do you begin to prepare for that situation? How can I ask to leave if things get intense, and those sorts of things. So. And then the please, so treat physical illness, so that, for most of us, when we're feeling ill, we're just going to be more emotionally vulnerable than when we're feeling better. That's just, but often the clinicians and the caretakers are the worst people taking care of themselves. I take care of other people. It's the mother in all of us. We're the last person to take care. But the most compassionate thing that you can do for somebody else is take care of yourself first. It's like they have the airbag. They say, put that on you before you put it on your child. Eat balanced eating. Balanced eating, everything. Avoid mood-altering drugs. Whatever. And actually, you've got to know for yourself. Some people react very badly to caffeine, some people to nicotine. Whether it's alcohol, I know that in many communities, whether they like it or not, drugs are coming into their communities. But even prescription drugs are being abused. So if those alter your mood, if you are more irritable with them, then you've got to just know it, even if it has a positive effect. So know those things. Are you getting 8 hours of sleep? And depending on your age, you'll need more or you'll need less. And often, again, it's like we'll burn the candle at both ends. We'll just keep on working late into the night. When our brains, the amount of effectiveness in terms of how the brain does in terms of learning, it's just getting worse and worse the later you go into the night, but you have to finish this thing. Actually, the best thing you might be able to do is go to sleep, allow those memories to consolidate and do better. Are you doing exercise, going to the gym, dancing, yoga, whatever it is? Okay, now decrease emotional suffering. So mindfulness, again, paying attention by observing your emotion, by noticing your urges. Now, the other thing that we tend to not do is because, okay, so, you go into a dark room and all the lights are out. It's a dark room and you hear, that's what you hear. So you start to get scared. Oh my goodness, what is going on? What's that noise? Now, what's the single best thing that you can do in that moment to decide what your next course of action is going to be? Turn on the light. Absolutely, turn on the light. It's the single best thing. Now, if there's a big monster, then okay, then your fear is justified and then you run out. But maybe it's your little new puppy dog that you forgot you've got, and it's sort of sitting there. But it makes a lot of noise, and then your mind starts doing all sorts of kind of crazy things. And so paying attention to your emotion is turning on the light in your brain to what's going on in there. It's saying, this is what's happening. I see it clearly now. And the more information you have, the more you can decide what it is that you're going to do. Paying attention to your emotions is flicking on that the switch. Remember that you're not your emotion, and practice loving it. You know, okay. Sometimes it actually feels quite good to be angry, you know? Yeah, it feels good. You know, whatever, or sad, or whatever it is. It's okay. Love it. It's part of you. Okay, now, so then how do you actually change? You know, because most people think, well, there's nothing I can do. I'm just angry, and I'm just going to have to wait for it. So one of the things is that, as I say, we're creatures of mindless repetition. We just repeat things over and over again. We do the thing. You get sad. You go into your bed, isolate, and all of those sorts of things. So one of the things that we teach is act opposite to what you would normally tend to do. Because what you're doing is now you're forcing the brain to wire differently. Now, psychotherapy and therapy, you know, like talking about problems makes you good at only one thing, and it makes you good at talking about problems. That's all. Its behavior changes the brain much more powerfully than simply talking about what's going on. If you're really upset at your mom and you go and you tell your friends and you're I'm so upset, I'm so upset, I'm so, you get good at that. And then you can just be good at talking about how upset you are at your mom. But so behavior changes your brain much more than just talking about it. And so you act opposite. So I am afraid of speaking to my boss who has 26 kids in my class. So she would act opposite to that fear by saying, you know what, when I'm afraid, I don't want to look at her, I don't want to talk to her, but I'm actually going to go and approach her. But you seem very approachable, so I don't think they would be afraid of you. But, you know, or I'm afraid of calling someone, so you act opposite it by acting. When you feel guilty, when you're going to act opposite, now if it's justified guilt that you've actually done something wrong, you have to apologize. I did something wrong, I feel guilty, I apologize. But when you feel, some people feel, who feels guilty for just almost anything that happens? They just feel guilty. Anybody here? You're one of those, yeah, you just feel guilty, right? And so, and you often haven't done anything wrong, but you just feel guilty about that situation. And so what happens is you're a prisoner to that guilt. It holds your mind when you haven't done anything wrong. And so we teach to act opposite, to just be in that situation. I am going to be in that situation. It's exposure therapy. I will be there until the guilt is no longer there. Yeah, go ahead. You know, I see between 12 and 24, but I mean, even with very young children, you can start to introduce these concepts of kind of exposure. And, you know, often, I mean, often people just say, you know, go and say you're sorry or whatever it is. So you're taught, but even children can get this. How can you do, what do you want to do? I want to punch him. What can you do differently? So you can start to, even with very young kids, introduce this idea that they don't have to act in that way. And actually, the sooner you can get them to realize that they have any control and behave differently, the more powerful that is. Yeah, go ahead. Okay.
Like, for example, like there's a difference between somebody feeling angry because somebody pushed them, or somebody feeling angry because there's like a serious situation going on, like sexual abuse or...
Right, okay.
So, I mean, these steps would then not work.
Okay, so here's the thing. So a very interesting question about the causes of it. All I'm saying is that if someone's behavior towards you has made you feel angry, and it's really like, you know, that they slapped you and now you really feel angry, they have doubly slapped you if you continue to feel anger after they have left. Not only have you suffered the indignity of being slapped, you suffered the psychological consequences. They have this sort of enduring control. They've hurt you twice in a certain kind of way. And all I'm saying is not to say that you shouldn't feel angry. All I'm saying is that for a lot of people, they then feel angry for 3 years. And I'm just saying is that maybe you like to feel anger. But if you don't want to feel anger, what I'm saying is you can validate that, yes, it makes sense that I'm angry, but rather than going out and being angry against the whole world, I can act opposite to my typical behaviors and do something opposite to that, do it or opposite or differently from that. So it's not to say, oh, I shouldn't feel that way. It's just to not stay in the intensity of it, is to act opposite. And often we see it in sadness and isolation. So they're sad, they isolate, they get into bed. And so one of the things that we'll coach our kids to do is to say, you know what, you're lying in bed and you're isolated and you're feeling miserable. I want you to act opposite to what you normally do. I want you to go and call a friend. And addressing the underlying causes might be something that you'll do in different. This is not going to address the underlying cause of why it happened. All I'm saying is to teach people that they have the capacity to shift the emotional intensity and intensity of the situation.
But sometimes, for example, I have a student that has a learning disability in my class, and that student is frustrated. So I understand that they're frustrated, but the only way to really resolve this frustration is if I, as a teacher, can direct him to somebody, an expert, that can help him work on learning the skills that he or she needs for their disability.
Right.
So other than that, all I see as a teacher is that frustration in my classroom. And unless we have that, which we don't have, unfortunately, and quite very often, then you really haven't, there's nothing you can do about the frustration.
No, but here's the other thing is that, you know, you cannot get anyone to do something that they don't want to do. It's just absolutely, and we're going to talk about motivation. Like my friend who goes to the gym over there, we're not going to get her to smoke. She's just decided she's not going to smoke. But so, you know, so if a person decides that they want to stay miserable, they can choose to stay miserable all they want. They can decide that that's what they're going to do. I'm talking about, you know, and you're right. So it can get really complicated, and you know. It's, well, all I'm saying is that, so what, you know, the other thing is this, is that we teach, like, often we try to teach people in the moment of greatest need. But you don't learn how to play tennis in your tournament. You learn how to play before, so when the tournament is there, then you've got the thing. So you don't teach, so we don't teach these emotion we teach this in a classroom, so in a classroom setting, so that it becomes part of their normal vocabulary, so that it's there. Now, there's that part of it of changing it in the moment. Now, why someone has a bad swing in tennis, that might be something that has to be worked out somewhere else. But if what they need to do is correct their tennis swing to play effective tennis, then you're going to teach them that. So if you're saying, okay, you know, your father was very abusive to you as a child, but you have to go and meet this guy who's going to interview you for a job, and you're going to get angry, having those emotion regulation skills. Now, you might still have to deal with that in therapy about why you're mad at your father, etc. But it's just like quick techniques for how to change the intensity and experience in the moment. So when you're sad, get active. When you're angry, be kind. You know, that's the other very powerful thing that you can do in anger, is be kind to somebody else. Then you also have to decide whether it's justified or unjustified. Thank you. Justified or unjustified. So justified emotions are consistent with your values. So if you've insulted someone, you feel guilty. Well, that's justified. You should feel guilty. It's the right thing within your values and cultural system to feel. Or when you're afraid of a snake, then that's justified. And then you have to, you wouldn't act opposite action in those situations. You wouldn't say, oh, I'm afraid of a lion, so I'm going to approach it. Or I've insulted someone, so I'm going to insult them again. Because those are justified, and then you've got to do that. So opposite action is only when it's sort of more unjustified. So, so you know, you feel guilty because you know, you got an award that you actually deserved, but you feel like, oh, other people should have gotten it or something like that. So then you act opposite, saying, you know what, I do deserve this. It's okay. Okay. So, you know, pleasant event. So there was there was eating chocolate, so I was with you with the eating chocolate because I had that on the top. But you know, you make your own list and have that list. And I have a lot of my kids, especially once I'm coaching, to carry these little books with them, like in their purses and everything, and say, okay, I want you to go to your list. I want you to pick one of the things that you've decided make you, even if it's just a little bit happier than not. And everybody should do it. And the other thing is, we often try to teach kids to do these things, but on our unit, all our staff and everybody is expected to do this stuff, so that we all do these things as well, and we talk about it in our groups. So you know, all you need is love, but a little chocolate now and then doesn't hurt. I think. Yeah, so I think that's it within a few minutes of the end. So I think I've got a couple minutes for questions before tea. And Lindt, that's the answer to your question. Lindt chocolate. Oh, it's a different question. Okay.
I have a question about the students who are troublemakers in the class.
Yeah.
They are disruptive, or the ones who tend to be funny to make others laugh at them. Is that because, or is it always, can I generalize here and say that they are coming from non-functioning families, or they have severe problems at home and that is reflected in their behavior? Are they always behaving this way because of sadness, or because they are ill-mannered and they have never been taught how to behave in the class?
Well,
and how can I differentiate, and how can I help them regulate their that behavior?
So there's quite a few questions, and I think that there are themes of what other people have asked. And let me just say that I have found certainly things at home can actually predispose children to certain kinds of behaviors, but I have not found like level of wealth or I mean, no parent wakes up in the morning and says, how am I going to make my child very destructive in the classroom? You know, it's neurobiology. And so so there are absolutely situations where you can trace it back to stuff going on at home, but it's not always the case. So automatically assuming that there's stuff going on at home, I mean, because if you've got kids and they're being disruptive, to sort of think, oh, well, because that's because they've got bad mother, and you say, well, wait a second, you know, I'm really doing the very best that I can. I mean, who here is not doing the best that they can? Anybody? I can help you with that. I mean, we're all doing the best that we can, given our circumstances. Maybe you say, well, I'm a little bit tired. Well, okay, then you're doing the best that you can when you're a little bit tired. So the other thing is this, is that what makes you feel better? If you have no other information about a certain person's behavior, what makes you feel better? That the child is doing the best that they can, or and that's the best that they can do given the brain that they have, or that they are a bad child? What makes you feel better, irrespective of what happens to the kid? Yeah, that imagining the best in each one of us, it doesn't matter what happens to that kid, it makes you feel better. In the absence of any information, always imagine the nicest possible thing about someone. Because you could imagine the worst about someone, but then you go around all day thinking, oh my God, you know, like she's so annoying. It's like terrible. It gets stuck in your head. And you say, okay, you know what, they're having a bad day, whatever it is. And I think, I mean, you know, the question of techniques in disruptive classrooms is again, it has to do with how many kids in your class? And do you have an aide? So are we seeing this theme? We're seeing the theme of having, you know, and you know, look, in the States as well, we have 24, 26 no aid disruptive kids. And I think that we're seeing this theme, and it's like, how do you begin as a society and as a culture to codify the expectations of saying there are going to be some kids who have needs beyond that which the standard teacher can address, and they might have special ed needs, and how can we either create within schools special ed classrooms or have aides that can take a kid out who's disruptive. But let me just say this thing about kids laughing, you know, because we said this before, and getting a reaction. If I feel really terrible about myself and I can get other people to laugh, and that makes me feel good even for a minute, feels so good. It's my 1 minute that made me feel so good. You know, and it's sad. It's really sad that that's what, but that's what it takes, you know. And so that's why you get these class clowns. But you know, at the end of the day, they don't have friends. It's just in those moments. And if they can sort of see, hey, look, you know, who do you spend time with? Well, no one, and all of that. Okay, so how can we take you? You're actually quite a funny kid, but it's just that how you're using it is not getting people to like you, other than for these short periods of time. How can we do this differently? But just imagine. But you know what? When you one teacher with 24, it's very hard to do that kind of work. And so I think that we need to think about how we can change that kind of culture at a higher level. I wouldn't do that. You see, I would only, if they do something that is really above and beyond their capability of doing, I would reinforce the heck out of that. I would say, that is incredible. I know how difficult it is for you to do that. I just want to tell you that, and you know, like all the other kids might say, well, we sit still all the time. You say, yeah, but you don't have that kid's brain. You know how difficult that is? That is really impressive. I just want to recognize. So you always try to reinforce the heck out of, you know, always catch them doing, I always do that all the time. I go to my staff and I say, I am just so proud of you for doing that. Well, this is my job. I just want to let you know that. So what I expect. Yeah, there's another question here. Oh, time is up. Oh, I can't read. Was there another question? Okay, leave the panel discussion. You know what, I want to answer, but I have to leave it for the panel discussion. Or I can be oppositional. But you know what? I want to reinforce sticking to the time. So thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Thanks very much.